Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
I was a college student at Temple University. In 1967, Prabhupada came to visit my college, and he had a few devotees with him, and in those days they used to dance in a circle and chant Hare Krishna. And when Prabhupada spoke, I was so non-conscious that I don't remember a lot of the things he said, but I did remember that he said, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, and no meat eating. And I was thinking, this is 1967, and this person is preaching no intoxication, no illicit sex in the middle of the university campus. He must have integrity. He must not be looking just for money or followers, but really presenting something genuine, because he was going against the current of the material world and what the young students were into. So even though I didn't have a intense experience with Prabhupada, I always carried that feeling of respect that I had from that first meeting.
The very first thing that he said that struck me on that day when he came back from the airport, not only was it the very simple words, but it was the fact that he made it like a very simple statement. I mean, it was without condemnation, without opinion. It was a simple fact. It's like, right now, if it was raining and I said, oh, it's raining outside, it would be a simple fact. You may or may not like the rain, but the fact is it would be raining. And in the same way, he said to us, there is no love in this material world. We were all hippies, we're from that generation. And the thrust of the hippie movement, particularly in San Francisco, was love. And not one living entity can say or deny that they are searching for love. I mean, even these little animals here, they can't go without love. If you have an animal in your house and you ignore that animal becomes very despondent. So every living creature in this world needs love, and innately desires to seek and find that love through relationship, through creating a situation with others. But we had all been disappointed. We had all been in love, or almost been in love, or thought we had been in love so many times, only to find the love was gone, the love was lost, the person or the object we love went away. So that very propensity of loving was also bringing a sorrow. And yet that wasn't really what love should be or was supposed to be. So we hadn't found it. And so when he said that, there is no love in this material world, such a simple and profound thing, but it brought about in my heart a great relief. I didn't have to look anymore. I didn't have to think about it anymore. It wasn't there. And it wasn't something that was negative at all, because he went on to explain what was real love. Why we were not finding love was because we didn't understand what was love. And he gave us, of course, the answer through Krishna. But it was like a relief. And that was the one thing that was the very first impression, strong impression.
The kirtan ended, and Prabhupada put on his spectacles, and he had what I'm sure must have been his own Srimad Bhagavatam in front of him. This was, of course, long before. This was, again, it was in early '68. It was long before he had actually translated any of it. But he was reading from it, and then he was speaking. And I remember noticing that as he spoke, a lot of times his eyes were closed, or if he was looking out, It was like basically just looking around the room. He didn't seem to be presenting himself or kind of advertising himself or trying to appear as a holy man like I had seen a couple other gurus around that were doing like that. And he seemed like he was very just, I remember noticing, he's just speaking this teaching right from this book, and then he's explaining it. I do recall specifically that in that particular lecture he remarked, so now they are saying that everyone is God. You are God, I am God. He said, so there are so many gods laying down in the street. Right? He said, so for you, God does not mean very much if you think that. He said, G-O-D-D-O-G. What is the difference? You say you are God, I say you are a dog. But if we are all God and gods are laying down in the street, then what is the good is no different than being dog. And he talked about the opulences. And that's a paraphrase, obviously. It's not exactly what he said, but I remember that he specifically mentioned G-O-D-D-O-G. And I was going from one viewpoint to the other right at that time, and immediately it just struck me right away that that's right. You know, obviously, how has God gotten into such a bad spot as so many people like me that were practically almost living in the street at that time, or were living in the street in some cases?
So on one occasion, we were just returning from the morning walk. We were nearing the temple. Dr. Patel was walking and having animated conversations with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was saying something critical about one of the well-known, figures of the recent history. And Prabhupada was quite critical. And Dr. Patel, as he had done many times, really objected strongly to Srila Prabhupada's criticism. And he was asking Prabhupada, why do you have to criticize? Let them be. You do your thing, let them do their thing. Just leave them alone. Why do you have to criticize them? They are great souls in their own right. So let them just be. If you don't agree with their philosophy, just let them alone. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped. And Prabhupada said that if I'm in an operating room and I'm conducting a operation with a patient, and someone comes into the room and starts cutting my patient, am I going to just stand there and watch it happen? No. I'm going to say, get out! Prabhupada said loudly, get out, you rascal! So I cannot be silent. These rascals and fools have destroyed the culture of India. And therefore I must speak out. And I will speak out. Prabhupada is very, very strong.
In the course of taking care of Manisha, who was only a 13-year-old child at the time, she went through a lot of stages. And her mother, Auntie Jana, had gone to Srila Prabhupada and said, what should I do with her? What's the best thing? And he said, you should simply keep her comfortable. So that was a very loose, kind of direction to go in, because comfortable could mean drugs or medication, or could mean moving and so many things. So we kind of improvised from that basic direction to go in. So we brought her to the Himalayas in the hot season and did so many things. And the mother's becoming anxious, and she was near dying, and so she really wanted to see Prabhupada to ask, and she was so distraught. So it was just before the evening artik, and Prabhupada was getting ready to go with Harisari, was his servant at the time. So we were able to go in, and there was myself and Auntie Jana, the mother, and the girl, Manisha. So we went in the darshan room, and the mother said, Prabhupada, she said, I don't know what to do, she's dying. And Prabhupada's eyes got, huge, and said, we are all dying. For you, tomorrow, for me, next week, we're all dying. And the way that he said it was like, where have you been? What have I been saying? What have I been preaching? Why did I come here? I came here to show you that we're dying and it's just a matter of time. You should chant Hare Krishna. And he was becoming like really kind of almost outraged that this would be a surprise, that, you know, you're now dying. And we were kind of thinking maybe we'd get some empathy of a different sort, some sympathy like, oh, I'm so sorry, but there was nothing. He cut to the chase immediately. There wasn't any type of soft pedaling, nothing like that, just right to it. And it really kind of threw us all back. And so Manisha was having a really hard time chanting, as you would. You know, she's 13, she's a bag of bones, and she didn't want to chant 16 rounds every day. So she asked Srila Prabhupada, you know, what should I do? You know, what'll happen to me if I don't chant 16 rounds? And he said, yeah, you'll be born, you know, in an aristocratic family or educated and wealthy. But he said, chant Hare Krishna.
We're in Berry Place Temple. Prabhupada's just given a lecture, and it's packed. Berry Place Temple room was small. Relatively speaking, it was small. Shyam Sundar had made a magnificent job of building it into something that was otherworldly. The temple room in Berry Place was just otherworldly, but it was small. And when it was packed, the condensation would drip from the ceiling and so forth. Prabhupada had just finished his talk and said, are there any questions? And immediately an Indian lady who visited quite frequently to do service, she was a frequent visitor, but she was an individual at the same time. She kept herself to herself and was quite argumentative with devotees, strangely enough. She liked being there, but she was a very argumentative. So Prabhupada said, question, are there any questions? She stood up immediately and said, Swami, can you see God? It was quite challenging. And I thought, And Prabhupada said immediately, yes, you cannot? Then he looked around like this. Krishna is everywhere. Why you cannot see? And Prabhupada didn't need to say anything else. For me, I realized everything in that moment for me. That Krishna, he's everywhere. So if I can't see him, I got to start working. I got to do something. He's everywhere. So he said, why you cannot see? And there was silence. And she was still standing. And Prabhupada was staring. Not staring like this, but gazing affectionately. Why? You cannot see. And she didn't know what to say. Silence. More silence. And they're just looking at each other. So then Prabhupada says, do you want to see? And the silence again, then she looks down at her feet and shakes her head like this. Then Prabhupada says loudly, therefore you cannot see. And if he said anything else, I can't remember. I was just stunned at how he dealt with this situation. At first it was a challenge. Swami, can you see God? Immediately, yes. You cannot? Krishna is everywhere. Why you cannot see? And then, do you want to see? No. Therefore you, and I almost saw the lightning come out, or whatever energy it was, come out of his finger when he said that to this lady. And she almost crumbled onto the floor. She got pranams like this. She didn't want to ask anything else. She'd heard what Prabhupada had. She'd heard what she needed to hear from Prabhupada, so she sat down. Like I say, if there's anything else after that, Prabhupada may have said more. I don't remember. I had what I had got from that. It was unbelievable. massive experience. Prabhupada could say more in one word or in a couple of words than you could read in a book of philosophy sometimes. That was another thing that took me about Prabhupada. His way with words, his expertise in not misusing one word or using any words unnecessarily to get his point across. And sometimes, as with that lady, even he used the silence to speak volumes, because there were big pauses between Krishna is everywhere, why you cannot see, and then nothing, silence, silence. It was remarkable. I'd never seen anyone like this before, and of course never, ever will again. So I'm glad that I remembered that one, because that's usually, if people say, can you tell us some Prabhupada memories? Usually that's the one I start with, that, and the way that lady was humbled.